Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwicta.
And this is not Merps. Chat, I'm sorry, but I killed Merps. I'm a very vengeful guy, and Merps took my spot 2 weeks ago, so I killed him. If you see Merps again, he's going to be a zombie, so make sure you what-face Merps, please, okay?
This is the end of Merps. 2 weeks ago, Merps made a not entirely fully planned comeback at that date, but somewhat planned, and took Tarrot's spot. And the week before that, actually, Tarrot was supposed to be on, but I got deathly ill, and all my streaming equipment got stolen at the airport. So we actually had to bump Tarot out twice, and now Merps is in Chicago at a Pokemon conference. So this feels like a really great time to bring Tarot back, and there's more to talk about now than there was a month ago. So this is actually a pretty good time to talk to Tarot. If you guys don't know, Tarot is a very active member on Arena HS. Has done like tons of research for the community and has like a lot of we've had him on last year at around this time too, and it's always great to talk to him, whether it's on Reddit or on or live. And he is not a streamer, and we rarely have people who are not like streamers on, but we've had him on before, and his ideas go so deep that he's really like you talk about community members, and there's like a half dozen or so that you'll see pop up in the arena communities from like a long time ago and continuously throughout. And Taro's definitely one of them. So welcome to the Lightforge, Taro. And
All right.
yeah, we'll see if Mercs comes back next week, or if he's gone for good. Lost to
All right, thanks.
Lost to the zombie world or Pokemon.
One thing I will say for the chat, I have played this this rotation, whatever. I've played a little. I've played maybe 20 runs, and I know that's like more than one run a day. That's not a little for most people.
I was about to say,
but
you
like,
say a little, you mean a little compared to like Collins or Shady. It's more than I've played.
Yeah, I've been too busy with Total War 3 Kingdoms. Like I was telling Abukta earlier, like I think Hearthstone are probably in Arena top 250 player outside China. I think that'd be fair with like all my accomplishments and stuff. Like in terms of like 3 Kingdoms knowledge, I'm like top 100 in the world. Like it's like even more elite than my Hearthstone stuff. So like when that game came out, that was like a major priority for me, and it still is.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you for the Rise of the Mechs analysis and just more like general philosophical stuff later. I know, like usually we get a guest on. We're like, oh, we'll talk about this or this. What do you want to talk about? Taro writes a whole bunch of bullet points. It's like, I want to go on a rant about buckets. I'm like, go ahead, perfect. I want to join you on your rant about buckets. But that's coming up in the second half of the show. In the first half,
I'll give you a warning. Chat. The message I wrote to Awakta, and this was kind of like an abbreviated message, I had to send him 2 messages because I went over the 10,000 character limit on my message.
Easily. I thought you were going to go over the second message too. It was very thorough, and like the vast majority of the points I agree with you on. So we'll get to that. But first, there was news and a patch that came out. Lightforge podcast is recorded on Sundays, and these patches come out early in the week. So on Monday, there was news of a micro adjust that happened on Monday in the arena, and it did the following thing. So I don't think anything was actually rebucketed, or at least they didn't say it was. It may have been, but they also released all the bucketing information. Remember, when Rise of Mechs happened, there was no bucketing information released. We were working with Arena Drafts to try to get something in case they never released it, but they did release it. It just came like a week later. And Blizzard's been really good about releasing the bucketing information in since they went into the Wild Rotation set. So definitely a shout out to whoever at Blizzard's making sure all the buckets are being kept track of and releasing this information. It's been great. So we'll talk about the bucketing aspect of it later. But the micro adjusts have happened, and they are weird. I think once anybody saw these adjustments, they're like, what is happening here? So the classes that went up are Rogue, Shaman, Priest, and Warrior, meaning they got better cards. And the classes whose goods cards are going to be suppressed a little are Mage, Paladin, and Hunter.
Hunter, a little.
Hunter, just a little. So if you remember the meta from last week, the meta was pretty much that Paladins are really good, Mages were really good. And so those two being knocked down was really to no one's surprise. Hunters were not that good. They were kind of like just okay. And now that they have been knocked down, they're at 44.5% win rate on HS Replay.
So this is not the first time that Hunter has been, when Hunter has gotten micro-adjusted, that it wasn't a scalpel. It was just they took a machete and they just chopped Hunter up. Like they did this before, like back in KFT, when Hunter was like OP, they just completely destroyed Hunter. And I think there was like one other time they did a micro adjust where Hunter was kind of good, and they completely destroyed Hunter. Now I have a theory about this, and it's actually related to Constructed. Because in Constructed, a few years ago, when Blizzard was talking about balancing in Constructed, they brought up how at like rank 25, Hunter was the best class, the best performing class at rank 25. Now they had like no no real presence in legend rank, but for newer players, Hunter was the best class. So my theory is that like if we take a look at HS Replay is more, it has a kind of a wider range, but it's more about a 4 or 5-ish win player average.
Right.
If you take a look at the bad players, who like people who average under 3 wins make up more than half of the people who play Arena. And for them, I would imagine that Hunter is probably an easier class to play because it has a very simple, like it's complex. There's a lot of decisions you make, but the idea is very simple. You go face, you click on the hero power button. And then if you're not the right class, you can't stop it. So I would imagine among those players, Hunter would actually perform higher than it would for more advanced players who could deal with more advanced mechanics.
So you think if Hunter is like at 50% win rate on HS Replay, or in like, let's say the month before Rise of Mechs happened, Hunter was at like, I don't know, like 51 or 52% win rate, that it was actually like just ridiculously unbalanced for the lower half of Arena players. Because if we're at 45% and this is like vaguely balanced at 50%, then at 52%, it must have been like a 57%, 58% kind of win rate.
Well, I'm not sure if it was like unbalanced, but I think that lower players would perform better with Hunter than they would with other classes. And I think like when they take a look at the entirety of it, I think that's the reason why Hunter got adjusted, or why Hunter got adjusted so much.
Yeah.
And there's also the theory that some people have put through that Blizzard is not using the right data when it comes to bucketing.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too, because that's definitely like that's where I'm leaning towards now. I've like just look at how this is going, right? Imagine. Let's look at what actually happened here, right? Rogue went up, Shaman went up, Priest went up, Warrior went up, Mage, Paladin, and Hunter went down. If you look at HS Replay stats, Mage and Paladin should have gone down, fine. Shaman, Priest, and Warrior should have gone up, fine. And you have weird outliers of Hunter, which was doing totally fine, and you have a theory that maybe it wasn't actually totally fine for the average player. Rogue was doing quite well. Rogue was like 50. Rogue was, I think, was it the top win rate class when these adjustments were made?
I'm looking at the thread here, and it says Rogue was already one of the top 3 classes, and they got buffed. Yeah. And Hunter was already one of the bottom 4 classes, and they got nerfed.
Yeah.
From the HS Replay data.
So one of the top 3 classes, I think, means Mage, Paladin, Rogue. So Rogue was up there on tier 1, and it got buffed.
I would say probably tier 2, because I think Mage and Paladin were like they were definitely ahead of Rogue.
Okay.
And then Rogue was kind of like the next step down, but they were the number 3 class.
Okay. So either way, Rogue is pretty far up. So the theory goes, Blizzard's using bad data, and the data is bad because it is taking X number of runs. And when it was set, there were enough players in the player base that X number of runs would be like, I don't know, a week or like 2 weeks or a few days or whatever. And Blizzard thinks it needs that kind of sample size in order to make these adjustments. And the people pushing the button never change the number of runs to match with the actual like patch dates. If you look at it in that way, think back to a prior meta and mix half of that with half of the data from the current meta, and things start looking like they make a lot more sense. Rogue in the prior meta, after they double nerfed it, was a pretty bad class. HS Replay has its win rate at like 44%, 45%. It definitely needed a buff. Um, and Shaman was still down there even after the various buffs. Shaman was never an above average class. Priest was never an above average class. Warrior was always at the very bottom. We don't even have to talk about Warrior. Whereas Mage was always doing okay in the prior meta. Paladin was one of the like lesser good classes, but it was so good after they adjusted it that the stats probably skewed it, and the amount of people who were playing it. Like a lot of people were very excited to play Paladin in a mech setting. And Hunter, Hunter was the top class in the prior meta by I think a fair margin as well. And so, maybe a mix of your theory and the theory that Blizzard's using partially old data can explain these micro adjusts. But what I don't think can fully explain the micro adjusts is that they're actually I don't know. Like, do you think you're talking about Hunter, right? Like, bad players are, or like in lower metas, not even bad players, just like in like 1-1 games, 0-0 games, 2-2 games, Hunters are just better. Are rogues just worse? Like that much worse?
I think it is kind of it's one of those things like with rogue. If you're not a good player or if you're not like advanced at the game, then it's a lot more difficult to play rogue. Like part of the reason I always liked playing rogue was because I felt I had a lot more decisions compared to other classes on what I could do. I had a lot more options, like with my drafting options, with my decisions in game, which minions I kill. Do I play backstab? Do I hold the backstab to trigger a combo? And like there's all these little micro decisions where if you miss one decision, then you'll lose the game. So I think if you're taking a look at newer players or players who are on the lower echelon, then it's probably harder for them to play rogue than it is like the mid range or the top tier players. Like that's historically been the fact in Arena, right?
Yeah.
Like
and so Rogue was given a plus 5% adjustment, essentially in terms of the win rate, just like Hunter the other way. So you're thinking that Rogue is disproportionately hard and could be like a minus 5% from normal players to HS replay static players. I know even in the prior meta at the end when Rogue got nerfed to hell, there were still like pro players or like top players who were saying like Rogue's actually kind of okay. Like it's not great, but you could make it work, and it's like it's better than its stats show, and I think that's true. Like you said, Rogue is always better for better players, assuming you don't have like a particular blind spot to Rogue, than the average would show. So okay, so these are kind of the two explanations. I do want to point out that in favor of the idea that Blizzard may be using bad data is also the last round of micro adjusts, where Blizzard punished Rogue despite them nerfing Rogue before, and Rogue actually ending up at around 50%, and everyone was happy where Rogue was at generally. And then when the nerfs came out, they like nerfed Rogue again, which is why Rogue ended up at like 45% to end the meta to begin with. And if you were using older data, Rogue used to be heavily dominant, right, when the game was first released with miscreants and the offering rates, and they had reestablished it. But again, that could also be explained by your theory, where they nerfed Rogue because Rogue was too good, and they realized they didn't nerf Rogue enough because the average players / below average players were still terrible with Rogue. Yeah. So
I will say, when I look at the Hunter data, HS Replay, if you look at the individual card data, you can see like the percentage of cards that are in decks. So if you take a look at Mage, for example, and you make sure you click on Firelands Portal and you make sure it's filtered for Arena. So it goes from about like 15% to about 12% or something like that.
Okay.
In Paladin, if you look at Muster for Battle, it goes from about 8% of decks to about 6% of decks.
Okay, so like minus 20-25%.
Yeah, but now if you go to Hunter and if you go to Glaive Zuka, for example, and you go on Arena, so it was in about 4.5% of decks before the nerf, and now it's in 1.5% of decks, which that's like a 3% drop. But if you take a look at the relative percent, that's like Glaive Zuka appears 33% as much as it did before the adjustments happened. Like Firelands Portal, 15 to 12 is like about 20% drop. Muster 8 to 6 is about 25-ish% drop.
Yeah.
And Hunter, it's like, and some of this is just people realizing this and not playing Hunter, but it's so steep, and it's like a 66% drop, and it's like over like one day. like
And,
it drops that much.
I mean, that's definitely Blizzard doing something, right? Like that's the data doesn't just happen in that way when you're looking at Mage, Paladin, and Hunter, because Blizzard did the same thing to all three types of cards. And we do know that Blizzard adjusts cards differently, right? They don't just adjust all the cards the same. We were talking about Evil Genius in one of our earlier episodes, where the offering rate to that card took a huge hit after a Blizzard adjustment, whereas its bucket did not take a huge hit. So Blizzard definitely has certain cards. My theory is that it's based on win rates, where a card with very high win rates gets adjusted down more. But this data that you're presenting looks like it's not based on win rates. At least I imagine not, because Glaivezuka's win rate is, let's say, I'm looking at it right now, it's 58.4%. I imagine Firelands Portal is going to be similar. Although you can't really... Yeah, it's for Hunter.
Yeah, if you take a look at like the Hunter class cards, and hold on, let me get rid of sparse data here. Glaivezuka is like by far the best card that Hunter has. Like it's kind of like on a tier of its own.
And Firelands Portal would not be because there's plenty of ridiculous mage cards.
Yeah. So here Glaivezuka, it's like 58.4%. And then the next highest class card is like Savannah Highmane at 56.8%.
Okay, yeah. That's a big jump.
Yeah, and I think like Muster is like by far, like Muster and Coghammer have like the same kind of jump in Paladin, where it's like let me get a Paladin here. Aegis replay is being stupid. I have to sort manually, but it's like, where is it? Muster's like at about 63%. Coghammer's like at about 63%, and the next closest card is like Shield of Minibot, 61%.
Yeah. And when you're looking at Mage, Conjurer's Callings at 60.4%, Firelands Portal at 60.2%, Flame Strike at 60.2%, Babbling Book, and Water Elemental at like 59.5%. So Mage has some company up there too. By the way, listeners, if you're take a guess at the number one performing Mage card in HS Replay. You'll never ever guess it, but if you think about it, you'll realize that it should be really obvious. And I'll tell you the answer in like 10 minutes. So you have a little time to think about it.
Are you talking neutrals or like all cards?
Class cards. Class cards. Mage class cards, number one on HS Replay right now. It's
because I was gonna say, if you take a look at neutrals for all class, do you remember last year when I was on? What was the best performing card of all neutrals last year for Wildfest?
Wildfest. What was it? Was it Recombobulator?
No, neutral cards.
Yeah. What was the best performing card? Was it Fellreaver?
Gnomish Experimenter.
Gnomish Experimenter. Wait, which one? Gnomish Experimenter is the one where
the three mana 3/2 that draws a spell or it draws a chicken.
Right. It draws a 1/1 if you draw a minion. Otherwise, you get an extra card in your hand. That was the number one performing card in Wildfest.
Yeah, for neutrals. Yeah,
for neutrals. That's crazy.
And like I told you guys, and you're like, and now it's the number 2 performing card right now, behind Fellreaver by like large margin.
Hold on, I'm looking at this right now.
Ignore legendaries. Number 1's Fellreaver, 60.7. Gnomish Experimenter, number 2, 59.6. And I guess Ship's Cannon is tied with that, but that's kind of got like a rogue buff going with it.
Right. Yeah. That's true. Ship's Cannon is there. Sea Giant, Gnomish Experimenter. Yeah. Yeah, it's right up there. It's beating out Sea Giant by a little bit. Wow.
I haven't been in Twitch chat that much because, again, Total War 3 Kingdoms. But apparently Stein's been memeing about Gnomish Experimenter being like the best card or the second best card in the game.
I mean, it's in the bottom of the 6th bucket, but it should not be. It's not even that. I mean, yeah, it's deck dependent. If you have a lot of spells and weapons and whatever, but maybe it's just that if you have a lot of spells or weapons, you have a really good deck, and those are the decks that would disproportionately take this card. Or maybe I'm just giving people too much credit for thinking that hard, like at all about this.
Let me see here. Let me sort by rares. Like, I think the problem is like it's taken like maybe 5. It's been picked like 5,000 times. If you take a look at some of the top rares, like Bomb Lobber has been played 100,000 times, and like Gnomish Experimenter is been played 5,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of it is that people do not pick this card because they're scared of it. It's another one of those, oh my god, I turned a minion into a chicken. This is so horrible. So people will
so
avoid it.
only good players who know what they're doing would actually even like select the card.
Or good play, and on top of that, good players who have decks where this might actually work.
Right. So it's a good player with a deck with plenty of spells and weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I had that. I actually had this point set up earlier for later, I guess, in my bucket rant about why deck win rate is a bad mechanic for Blizzard to use, because you got outliers like this that make no sense if you're going at pure mechanical data.
Yeah. And I see chat, some people are saying variance. This is, I mean, you have enough data here that is not sheer variance that goes that high. So there's some things that sheer variance will explain, but a lot of this stuff, there's reasons behind it, and you got to keep digging until you find the reasons. Like once we talk it through, right? That makes sense, right? Like who would take Gnomish Experimenter? Not casuals. Well, maybe it's kind of a meme. But generally, people don't like destroying their own cards, and then you mix that up with spells and weapons being good. Okay. All right. So back to this meta that we're in right now. So the meta that we're in right now, after these weird micro adjusts, is very rogue dominant. You want to pick rogue if you want to win. Rogue is at 45.5% win rate on HS Replay, and as Tarrot said before, Rogue is better if you're better. So it's in the hands of a top player, and if we're a really good player, its win rate is going to be even higher. This is for a HS Replay, it's 4.5 win rate players. So if you're like a 6-win player, Rogue's going to be even better for you. And Rogues are that freaking dominant. I know I get shut out by Rogues once I hit 9 wins, like all the freaking time. It's very annoying. I would say right now, the top of the meta, as in after you get to 9 wins or like above 9 wins, the last few games are about as unfun as they've ever been. There's probably, I don't know, there's a couple metas that stand out as it being maybe even less fun, right? Fireless Portal meta, that time when the Hunters got ridiculous for no good reason. The prior Rogue meta that we had an experience with about 2 months ago, that was definitely even less fun. But this is up there past the like top tier. This is like tier 2 of unfun, right? Tier 1 is like absurdly broken. How is this even a game? Tier 2 is like grossly superpowered, like totally warping everything you're trying to do if you want to get to 12 wins. Because of the micro adjusts, Blizzard raising Rogue, it's created that issue on top. And if you look at it the other side, they also raised Warriors, right? Warrior win rate is still 42%. I think it's a matter of like people still not really knowing how to play Warrior that much. I don't think Warrior's that bad.
Well, I think the one thing with Warriors, I don't think micro adjusts can save Warrior. And you really need a combination of the meta, and you need a combination of the cards available to be able to craft a Warrior deck that works. Because like when it was in Witchwood, Warriors got Warpath, and they still weren't all that good. Like then they got Boomsday, and they got Super Collider, they got Omega Assembly, they got Omega Devastator, and they were fine. Like they weren't really amazing, but they were fine, I would say. And it really wasn't until you got to Rastakhan's Rumble, and then you had Amani Warbear roll in as a giant taunt with initiative. You had Dragon's Roar, which let you get minions a lot of value, and then everything slowed down as well. So it was like one of those like perfect storm things where you had a meta where you could play a bunch of big taunts. You had the Super Collider and the Warpath, which let you get to the point where you could play your value stuff. You had enough a life game so that you could basically outlast everyone. And like that's what it took to make Warrior good in Arena. And it's like no matter how much you push that slider for Warrior, like they can't overcome just how bad their cards were, like in history. Like they got the worst cards for like the first 2 years.
Yeah.
It's really like what are the big cards that they had that rotated in outside of the Boomsday cards?
The
Like,
biggest card that rotated in: Dynamatic, Super Collider, Fool's
uh,
Bane. Like,
well, okay,
they're good.
Fool's Bane. Well,
But
yeah, I
they're
was gonna say
good. Omega
Dynamatic, Super Collider.
Devastator. Oh no, that's a new card. That's not
Yeah, I was
rotating
gonna
in.
say Dynamatic, Omega Devastator, Super Collider were all Boomsday cards.
Yeah.
So like the only good card that they really had that came in from the other sets was Fool's Bane.
Yep.
And like, yeah,
Yeah.
you can't
King's
overcome.
Defender. Fool's Bane, King's Defender. Because King's
Okay, yeah.
Defender was before the Fiery War Axe nerf, when that was how they were scaling the cards.
Okay.
But yeah. But yeah, I mean, I agree. You go down besides those two cards, and it's all Boomsday. Everything going down.
Yeah.
You have Omega Assembly later. That's Boomsday 2. And then like their normal classic cards. And then yeah, also what do you call it? Rise of Shadows cards. Some of them are pretty good.
Yeah.
Improve morale, sweeping strikes. I love sweeping
Mhm.
strikes. That card's bailed me out so many times.
I actually had a warrior that did well. Like the first week or so, I was just experimenting with like all the classes, trying to see how they felt. And I actually had a warrior that did decently well. It was kind of like a mid-range tempo warrior,
mhm.
but it had like sweeping strikes, and that thing hit so many times.
It's
Like,
betrayal, but you can make it hit like multiple times
oh
for
yeah,
like a very small conditional, right? It's a tempo game. You want to be on the board anyway. Like as
not is it multiple times or is it just like one?
well, I just mean it still
Oh
exists
yeah,
on
you
the
can't
board,
hit
right?
multiple times.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's a buff. It does hit multiple times. So that was just like a one-time thing, but that's
Oh
probably because I
no.
kill
If it's
whatever
a
I throw in.
one-time thing, it would be like still good, but because it
Mhm.
has the potential to like take over the game, it's near pre. I mean, it is premium. It's really a premium card that they put in the 6 bucket.
Mhm.
Not a super premium card, but I consider it up there. And it will get even more use when it's in a meta that actually has like a lot of rush minions and stuff.
Yep.
Which this one does not. But yeah, I think you can. Okay, so one thing with micro adjust, that Blizzard tries not to move the needle by more than like 35% in the
Mhm.
adjustments. They do. They definitely do. They say they try not to, but there are definitely classes and metas in which we're looking at a class and we're like, yeah, you're being offered this thing like twice as much as you should be. There's no way this is only 30-40%. We've done the math on this. So they do go out of their rule, but they try to stay in that rule. So within that rule, yeah, warriors are not going to be a viable class. You have to break some rules for warriors, especially in a meta like this, where they don't have the good card pool. But if you just like quadrupled, quintupled their top bucket offering rates, and everybody like you just have all the weapons that you could possibly want, and
Mhm.
then you can diversify into your top level cards. Like you have all the mech warpers, your piloted shredders, flame jugglers, krakens, sea giants, argent commanders that you can pick, your executes. Your top bucket card is like outside of weapons, frothing berserker, right? Like just a super good tempo like 3-drop. I think you could bring warriors up.
Yeah.
It will not be fun for the meta if you bring warriors up, so I'm not saying do it. But I think it is possible. It's not a good tool for warriors. It's better now with buckets than micro adjust had been before. Because without buckets, micro adjust existed for about a year before buckets, and it did not solve the
Mhm.
warrior problem at all. Not even a little really. Even
Yeah.
though they tried really hard, and that's because once they dialed up the offering rates to a certain level, you just ran into too many weapons, because you would just your weapons run into each other, and then all the weapon picks that you would get would become bad picks because you can't have like 10 weapons in a deck even though they're all good cards, and such a high percentage of your cards are weapons that it would really mess with things. But in the bucket system, you're like more or less guaranteed to get like a choice that is a minion that is also really good, whether it's Omega Devastator or Frothing Berserker, or like a Mech Warper or Piloted Shredder or Sea Giant as like your options.
All right. Random thing which just popped into my mind. So when I asked about the set rotations, I asked about the Hall of Fame, and Ixar said something along the lines of Hall of Fame is out, but it might be something that we will rotate in for like a set or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So one of the things that I realized is Blizzard has sets that are not official sets. Like Taverns of Time is not an official set, but it's a set. It is a set of cards, which is like 40 or 50 cards, which they could rotate in for a set rotation. The set I was thinking of is, do you remember those arena only cards that people voted on at BlizzCon?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The
one
blazing longsword.
Which one was that? I don't remember the one specifically.
That was the 3-mana warrior weapon 2/3 that had it did its damage to adjacent minions.
Okay. Yep. I vaguely remember that.
Okay. So what I remembered is like this happened right before the like when they did their initial bucket system. It was like during the same time as this thing. And warrior was actually, I think, the #1 class before Witchwood, based like just on the back of blazing longsword being in the arena.
I mean, it's a ridiculous card. I think we rated it like almost a 200. But yeah, and at the time it covered because that was already in standard. So yeah, at the time it covered the weakness of that was an era where there was no Fool's Bane and there was also no Super Collider. So the Blazing Longsword filled that gap. That is the warrior's inability to deal with two things at once.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like if they are ever going to rotate that set back in, and then like is that
don't give them ideas. Don't give them ideas like that. Taverns of Time, never again. That like BlizzCon people voted in set. No. Even worse, if they rotated in the BlizzCon set, like the options of all the BlizzCon set, not even just the ones that people voted on, they're like, well, we have the art and everything else done for everything anyway. Like, let's just bring it all in. Oh, that would do things to the arena. I remember some of those cards that I was just looking at, and I'm just like, what are they? Like, are they just seeing, like, is this a test on BlizzCon people on, like, how ridiculous they want the arena to be?
I think one of those cards actually ended up being a card they printed during the, like, there was a hunter card that, like, changed your hero power or something like that, and that ended up being, like, an actual card they printed at one of the standard sets.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
I didn't notice it if that happened. Yeah,
I think it was like it changed your hero power to be able to attack any minion. I'm not sure. Does chat know anything about that? Like I could look it up, but like we got other things to talk about.
Yeah. It's just going back, like they have a lot of options, and I'll bring this back up. But let's link into the bucket talk about what options Blizzard actually has to mess around in the arena. But in the current meta, you want to be a rogue. Definitely want to be a rogue. For some weird reason, even though they didn't touch Druid is up. They haven't touched Druid in a while, really, since they gave it a buff, and it's been fine. And this is a pretty suitable meta for Druid. It's very normal. It's very curve-stony. Druid's good at that. Druid has a lot of good curve cards, and they have that hero power ping. Mage is coming in at number 3. Paladin's still there. So one thing Blizzard did get right is they did nerf Mage and Paladin, and I would not want to know what would happen if a Mage and Paladin stayed the way they were before, because they're still doing like quite well. But you have the same thing, because Rogue was top 3 before, and it read so the top 4 was Mage, Rogue, Paladin, and Druid. Now the top 4 is still Rogue, Druid, Mage, and Paladin in a different order after the buffs. And what these classes all have in common is the ability to ping, / the Paladin's ability to sort of ping. And when it comes to Curvestone, that's a very, very, very powerful tool. So that's a good way to remember what the powerful classes are, and it's a good way to think about their hero powers. When you get less Curvestone-y, more into the late game, more doing whatever, the hero powers are less defining. And the ping effect is less game determining, because you just think about you coin out a 2/3, your opponent plays a 2/3. Well, now your opponent has the option, if they can ping and you can't, to just kill your 2/3 for free if they want. If they don't even have to use the option, right? They can just slam down a 3/4 if they have it or whatever. But it gives them such a ridiculous option. And anytime you gain an edge in Curvestone, your minions usually have 1 health. And it can just be wiped away at 2 mana.
By the way, a small thing, like for chat, or for like people out there listening, I'm just going to say this. 1-drops are really important now. Like they've been important, but Like, I had a rogue run today, which went 12. And I'm going to say one of the best cards I had in that run was Crystallizer. Crystallizer, if you don't know, epic card, 1 mana, 1/3.
I didn't
Deal
even
5
realize
damage
that
to
card
your
was still in the game. That's Boomsday, right?
Yeah, that's Boomsday, I believe, yeah.
Interesting. Anyway, 1 mana, 1/3. Has irrelevant text.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes. But like, I had like 2 Swashbucklers, I had an Argent Squire, I had a Mecharoo, I had a Crystallizer, I had 5 1-drops, and just having that 1 mana card on 1, especially with the hero power, or especially with a 2/3 to follow it up to be able to ping off the 2/3, or to make the opponent waste their hero power, like, it gives you so much it gives you so much just to have those cards around. So like, if I were to say one piece of advice for the whole meta, it's pick up all those premium 1 mana cards.
Yeah.
And I think even HS Replay, they even show that, because it's like Bell Reaver, Gnomish Experimenter, Ship's Cannon, Wisp, Argent Squire is like the 5th best card among all neutrals right now.
Yep. Argent Squire is insane. If you're wondering why Argent Squire is beating like things like Mecharoo, it's because Argent Squire is bucketed in the bottom of the 6 bucket. And and Mecharoo is bucketed much more appropriately. Let's see which bucket Mecharoo is. Oh no, it's not bucketed very appropriately. It's in the top of the 5th bucket. But still, if you're not doing mech stuff, Mecharoo is not doing anything more for you than Argent Protector.
And if you are doing mech stuff, then definitely take a Cogmaster. I know Shady really loves this card when he does the mech stuff. I think it's like in the 4. Yeah,
really?
It's
Cogmaster? I hate that card. That card does nothing way too often.
You have not had Cogmaster into Cogmaster on 1 into a Noyotron on 2. Like, this is a card, when I see it now, it's like it's an auto kill for me, because if they're playing that card, they have mechs, and that card, like, I know you guys rate it low,
yeah.
But if you have the mechs, if you have the Noyatrons, if you have the Micro Machines, if you have the what are the other ones? I know there's a few more 2 mana mechs I'm missing out on.
Right, but you have to have specifically 2 mana mechs, and you have to get them, right? Like, after your hand's already taken up with 1 spot with the Cogmaster, and at that point you get a 3/2. That's only a 3/2 on your turn or on their turn if they don't remove your other mech first.
Yeah, but I've seen this card do a lot of work. Like, I've seen this card as a 3/2 a lot more than I've seen it as a 1/2. And as I said, I know Shady, he really likes this card as well. I think part of it is also that I was kind of like forced to play Paladin a lot, because I kept on getting like Warrior. I got like Warrior Priest Paladin like 4 times in a row.
Oof.
Or something like that. And like, I was trying for like focus on a good class. So I was playing Paladin a lot. And Paladin's probably the one, I would say they're the best class at like going full mech.
Yes.
Because they have all the magnetic stuff, and they have early game mechs in Glowtron and Minibot if you get Minibot against like relevant cards. And so for Paladins, like, if you take that card, you're probably going to get something that's going to activate it.
Yeah. So yeah. You take a Cogmaster, it matches up okay against 1-drops, right? It trades against most 1-drops. And if assuming they don't kill it, because they like it, if they do kill it, they trade 1-drop for 1-drop, you don't really care. And if they don't kill it, you drop your mech on the next turn, and you have your advantage. Your 1 mana card's dealing 3 damage now, potentially even eating their 1-drop if they have it. I can see it. I can see it. To me, well, like, whenever I've seen Cogmaster, it's been 50-50 whether it's done anything, like whether it's operated as a 3/2 or it's operated as a 1/2. Which, if it were the case that Cogmaster just said, like, half the time it's a 3/2, half the time it's a 1/2, it would be something like what's that Joust card?
The
1-drop
Gadgets and Jouster, the 1/2 that can become a 2/3.
Yeah, so it would be like a Gadgets and Jouster, which we have rated a 92, so we still don't like that card too much, but it's definitely draftable. Whereas Cogmaster we have as like not that draftable. So I guess for like, from what I've seen, from how people are usually using Cogmaster, the kind of decks they're putting Cogmaster into, it's been functioning kind of like a Gadgets and Jouster. like a little better than a Gadget Jouster, I'd say. But that's just my my anecdotal experience of what I'm seeing. I haven't played with this card in this meta because we rated so low that I'm like it's in like the fourth bucket. We rated a 59, so I would not take it outside of like experimental reasons. But I'll give it a shot next time I have a mech deck. What I do like about this meta is sometimes you're just forced into mech decks, which for me, and I normally avoid all types of like synergy kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting that sometimes you just make your first like 6 picks and you're like, well, I guess Mech Warper doesn't look so bad, and now we're a super mech deck. But yeah, okay. Any final words outside of that one drops, which I fully agree with. The one drops are a ridiculous game swinger in this meta, and it starts your curve one turn early in a curve stone meta. Yeah.
Okay. One thing I think, and this is a problem I always have, when the meta gets like really fast, my first instinct is to try to go faster than other people are going. So what will happen is, and this is a problem I had, is like I would draft decks with like 8 or 9 2-drops or something insane like that, because I wanted to be faster. I wanted to make sure I hit my curve.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening is that a lot of the games, they just had more powerful cards than I did.
Right.
So like the little advantage I had. And then some games I ended up getting outvalued.
Yeah.
Like I just got 2-drops, and 2-drops didn't do anything here. So I think like and again, this is like I have to play more, because I honestly have not been doing that well this meta, partially because I haven't been playing enough, and partially because I've been like trying to experiment and figure things out. But I think I figured out that it's like a quick mid-range, I want to say. Like if you're not going to go for like some like mech stuff where you just blow people out, or if you're not going to go for power cards. I call power cards that hit well above their mana curve. So like for Druid, Power of the Wild, Blessing of the Ancients, those are cards like they'll be 3 mana or 2 mana and then give you like 5 or 6 mana worth of tempo or something like that. So I'd say those are power cards. But if you're not going for a deck based around that, then you want to kind of go with, I would say, a quick mid-range style, where you definitely get 1s and 2s, but you make sure you fill up on premium 5s, 4s, 5s, and 6s. Like Scribe, definitely. Dalaran Crusader, definitely. I would say like what's the card? Sky Golem as well. Fell Reaver, obviously. So like you go for those like really really powerful pit fighter. So like that would be my suggestion, is that try to go for like maybe 3 or 4 1s, 5 or 6 2s, enough so that you can hit your curve reliably, but then kind of try to focus on hitting 5s and 6s. That'd be what I would do.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Like normally the like generic thing that beats a deck, right, is to make a deck that's a little bit slower. The deck that's a little bit slower generally wins in a matchup. So you generally want to be a little bit slower, or you want to be a lot faster. You can't be a lot faster in this meta because things are so fast that there's just no option to be a lot faster than another deck in a way that you can like kind of get under them too successfully. So you want to be a little slower, but it's also curve stone. So you don't want to be like slow to the point in which you're losing the board more often than not in the beginning, which is where the 1-drops come in. 5 or 6.
I was going to say, related to that, as fast as this meta is, this is not really an aggro meta. Like, this is something Shady's talked about, and I definitely agree. This is a meta where you're trading a lot.
Yeah.
Because board control, and because of that, you need more resources if you're not going face and if you're trading. Like, if you're going face, you can go, like, super, super aggro.
Yep.
But if you're trading, then the game is naturally... Like, it's going to be fast, but it's going to end later because you're going to need more stuff to end up getting to that end game.
Yeah, your end game is getting to the point in which you have 15 power on the board and your opponent has nothing, and then you hit them to the face in 2 turns and win. That's most end games if you're the person with fewer cards. If you're the person with most cards, you can also just do the classic arena thing and outcard advantage them by 1 card in the end and eventually win based on that. So you want to have both options available to you, which means you want to be a card or 2 thicker than your opponent. So yeah, I would even go like less fast than, or maybe not less fast, but in terms of the drops, because I normally take like 6-2 drops. I'm pretty strict
Mhm.
about 6-2 drops unless I'm rogue, and like sometimes unless I'm paladin I'm a little more flexible with. But for paladin, I also want a lot more one drops definitely. But I'm usually comfortable with like 2 1 drops. 1 drops are iffy. I try to have two. I'm not like extremely sad if I don't have two, but I know my deck is like not as powerful in this meta. 3 I would say like is kind of the most I'll go with unless I have a paladin or a rogue deck or a warlock deck, in which case I'm definitely happy going more with ones. So I think I'm like maybe like 10 to 20% less early curve than when you draft. But
Mhm.
yeah, but generally, because every time you have an extra 1 drop as opposed to a big card, that's a really big like card advantage swing, right?
Yeah.
On the games in which you play it. So that extra card, like play around with that. I can't claim to be having great results either. My average is normal. For playing all
Mhm.
classes evenly, it's my normal like 7.3 wins per run kind of deal. But I top out, like I get destroyed once I hit 9 10 wins.
Mhm.
You guys who are watching this on YouTube, you guys know there's not been a 12 win video out yet because I haven't gotten a 12 win. So we'll hopefully change that soon, but we're gonna put out a nice Warrior 10 win instead to bridge the gap. Okay,
Oh yeah.
now
One
let's
more thing.
yeah
One more thing. Uh, I almost forgot to bring this up, but Shaman is actually a class now,
yeah.
and with Shaman being, like I'm seeing a lot more Shamans,
It's a
and with
fifty point
Shaman
four
being,
percent win rate, and solid number 5.
yeah. Well, the problem with Shaman is that Shaman has, number one, I think Shaman has more AOE's than any other class right now,
Mm-hmm.
and number two, they have Walking Fountain.
Yep.
So like Shaman is I dread, like you said, you dread playing against Rogue. I dread playing against Shaman because it's one of those things like it's kind of like Abyssal where you have to beat them before
Yep.
turn 8,
Mm-hmm.
or else Walking Fountain is just going to undo everything that you did and wipe your board. And it's one of those things like you have to go aggro and tempo, and then you get wiped out by AoE.
Yep.
And you can't really go mid range against them because a single Walking Fountain can kind of just flip the board back in your favor.
Yeah. Also,
So like,
Hagathos doesn't care about how much health your minions have for the most part.
oh
Like if they get it early enough. So even if you're trying to play around board clears, half of their major board clears that you care about, you can't play around.
yeah. So like, what I would say is like, Shaman is like the one class right now. Like you said, you hate Rogue. I hate
Mm-hmm.
Shaman because it's one of those things where it's like I feel no matter. It's kind of like the old Warlock thing where it's like no matter what I do, I get punished. Like
Mm.
I think Rogues just have better decks, but Shamans it feels worse to like lose because you spread to avoid a kaboom bot and then got hit with a maelstrom portal that wiped out all your spread
Yep.
or things like that.
And there's nothing you can do about it. You have to play in that
Yeah.
way. Like you can't like play
Mhm.
scared against a shaman, um, unless you do have that insane like card advantage and your own insane healing, and because you can't even hard
Mhm.
remove walking fountains. They get so much of their value before it's your turn.
Mhm.
It's problematic. But yeah, like what I don't like about shaman is when you're draft. Like I tried to draft control shamans like twice, and it's only ever sort of worked out. It's only ever sort of worked out because of freaking like there's so many like cards that benefit your board. So many of them
Mhm.
in shaman in neutrals, and you have to avoid
Yeah.
all of them. And so I just end up with these like hybrid decks instead, rather than like these more pure control decks. Like they're control leaning. I have like 3 board
Mhm.
wipes. I have like a fountain or two. Like it's control. I'll outlast you. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lose to aggro, but it's not really control.
Yeah.
And that's
The
that's
last two
me not
the last two
committing
times
to
I
drafting
drafted
it.
Shaman, I tried to draft control Shaman, and then I've gotten 0 walking fountains.
Yeah, that happened
Now
to me
we
once.
went over this. Yeah, we went over this on before the stream. There walking fountains. There's 1.2 walking fountains taken, not offered, taken
Mm-hmm.
per deck, according to HS Replay.
Yep.
So the idea that, so you should really expect to be able to get one, And I know it's just like a small variance, but not getting a single one, it just like
It screws your whole
that's
deck
part of,
over.
yeah, that's in my bucket ramp, by the way, where you have like a like because of the bucket system, you have you're encouraged to draft in certain ways. Like because of Druid, for example, you're encouraged to draft like token Druid,
Yeah.
because you'll offered roars, be offered board buffs. But if you draft a token deck and then you don't get those cards, you've just completely ruined your deck. And the same thing with Shaman. Like you can have the AoEs, but if you don't have that card to like just flip the game back to your favor, then it just feels horrible to play that deck.
Yeah. It's still pretty powerful. My hybrid Shaman decks with no walking fountains and like 2 Hagatha schemes, I got one like 10 wins or 9 wins or something like that. And I was surprised. But like Hagathas is really powerful in this meta because no one can play around it. And so they play into it, and then you Hagathas and they have like 2 cards left. And as long as you have other heals besides walking fountain, once you realize you may not be getting a walking fountain, you're still pretty solid. Not a monster deck, but you know, like you said, right? Shamans are in the arena now. They're definitely a class that exists, that you can play, that you will play against. They're a thing. Okay, let's move on to the bucket rant. But before that, let's lead into it with how buckets are right now. Right now, with Blizzard's bucketing data out of the cards coming in, it's become clear. Mech Warper is in the top half of the second bucket. It is the only new card in there. And there are no cards in the first bucket for neutrals. Yep. In the bottom of the second bucket, you have Piloted Shredder, Bomb Lobber, Flame Juggler, Arcane Dynamo coming back there, North Sea Kraken there. So you have a pretty hefty bottom of the second bucket list. Then in the third bucket, which is where your Sea Giant, Archer Commander, and Dark Iron Dwarf normally are, you also have Evil Heckler and Spider Tank now. Going down one more, bottom of the third bucket, Piloted Sky Golem, Recombobulator, Tinkertown Technician. So the top seems okay. When you get farther down, things get a little more iffy, but for the most part, like I think you could feel it in the play. Like the bucketing's been, I think, overall pretty good for the old cards coming in.
I would say so, except for cards that, and this is part of the rant as well. But there are a lot of cards that belong in the top half of the first bucket that, for whatever reason, were not put in there. Like Paladin, Coghammer, and Muster are not in the top half of the first bucket, and like they're two of the most powerful. Like literally in the history of Hearthstone, if you want to talk about like the top 10 most broken cards that are not legendaries, both of those cards are in there.
Yep.
Like factoring in standard as well. Like Mage, you get Firelands Portal. That's not in the top half of the first bucket. Glaive Zuka, I guess Glaive Zuka underperforms, but for most people, they think it's like most hardcore Hunter players think it's the best card that has ever been printed for Hunter. Like looking through here.
Yeah, see, some of these we don't like. Some of these I don't disagree with Blizzard on. Like Glaive Zuka not being a 0.5 bucket, I don't really disagree with that in this particular meta. Like I take an Eaglehorn Bow over a Glaive Zuka. Hunter's not that aggressive in the way that their card pool is being set up right now, and compared to the meta, like Hunters are a card advantage class. Like you got to survive until then, and you have to be able to split the switch as one of your win conditions if you need to. But it's not. This is not like GVG where Glaive Zuka was that dominant, right? And Firelands Portal, I haven't had like, I don't know. It used to be. I've never. Let's start. I've never thought Firelands Portal was a crazy good card. It was just a product of that mages were getting offered more than 2 of them per run, and this was back in the non-bucketed days where when you're offered a Firelands Portal, like a really good card, it's usually up against crap, and so you take it, and so it created a really bad kind of meta. But like I never thought it was a particularly ridiculous card, just like top of the power level. I do agree about Muster and Coghammer though, and I throw Shielded Minibot in there. Shielded Minibot is not a card you can recover from in Curvestone very easily.
Oh, by the way, do you want to? You said earlier about the chat that they wouldn't be able to guess the best card in Mage.
Oh,
did you want to tell them?
Best card in Mage with a total of 27 appearances, so small sample size alert. It's
Mhm.
Shatter. And I don't think Shatter's on anyone's radar, but if you think about it, who would pick Shatter? Someone with a crap ton of freeze, and only someone with a crap ton of freeze. And if you have a crap ton of freeze, you're doing pretty well in the first place. And then if you have Shatter, it's a 2 mana assassinate. Like that, it makes kind of sense. But that's also a small sample size. It's in the very last bucket. You almost never see
Oh,
it.
Shatter isn't actually in there. Shatter is from Whispers of the Old Gods,
Oh,
so
is that why?
It's a holdover from the last meta. So
That
like they have the data
okay,
from like the last
okay.
14 days, and I was like, so sorry, chat. Shatter's not there. The number one card is Power of Creation.
Okay, okay. I was gonna make a nice fun point with Shatter, and now it's just a regular powerful card. Like now there's not much of a point being made here. All right, but you're right. Shatter is. I keep thinking. I like literally think Shatter is a classic card. I don't know why.
Because Broad said something about when Cone of Cold rotated out, that Shatter was the kind of card that he would want to rotate in to replace Cone of Cold.
Right, maybe it's
Oh,
yeah.
by
I
the
mean, it makes sense in my mind. It's so like elegantly, suitable
Mhm.
for classic.
by the way, I'm not sure if you were paying attention, but Mike Dene had a stream yesterday with his daughter, and he made mention. Now, among the things that I have done, I discovered a bunch of new cards that are going to be rotating into the game. When I looked at the initial buckets, it was there were a bunch of cards they printed that were not cards that were in the game. And what I was able to do was I was able to figure out that these cards are actually replacements for all the cards that got rotated into the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike Dene said that those cards are probably like in a few weeks going to rotate into the game, the
Oh,
new replacement cards. And he brought that up on
nice,
his stream.
nice. So we're gonna get a few new cards, probably like 7th bucket power level, given the history of the new replacement cards. But that's interesting. Like you use these cards in the arena quite frequently. Like I've definitely drafted
Yeah.
Icicle more than a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, awesome. So we'll be getting new cards in a bit. Okay, so let's go on to the rest of the buckets. I'm looking at like you're talking about the top 0.5 bucket.
Yeah.
Implosion is the other big offender on my list of should be 0.5.
Oh
Was
yeah,
always
definitely agree.
ridiculous, and it's not for some reason.
Oh, by the way,
Um,
do you remember what card was not 0.5 last meta? The previous rotation in Warlock.
which card was not? I mean,
It should have been there, but
was
it was not
Abyssal
there.
not?
Abyssal was not.
Jeez, I don't even remember that Abyssal was not, but I guess that makes sense. I was offered a crap ton of Abyssals. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, nope, that
And
makes
I'll go over it
sense.
more. There were more Abyssals last meta than there were when Abyssal was so bad in MSG that they had to nerf its appearance rate by 50%.
uh, yep, that feels right. That feels very last meta. There were Abyssals
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. You just expected it to come on 7, and if it didn't, you're like, "Ooh, dodge one."
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we jump into the bucket rant? So the bucket system came out
Oh yeah.
like 2 years ago.
Year, over a year ago. It came out
No,
it came out March, March of last year.
really.
Like the
Was Witchwood? Oh
yeah
yeah,
yeah
Witchwood was last year. I keep thinking
yeah
Witchwood
it
was two
was
years ago. Yeah.
yeah, it came out like the month before Witchwood was when they released it. It was like right at the end of Kobolds and Catacombs.
Yep. Okay.
So like they had the first variations there.
Yeah. So
All
it
right.
came out. It came out a year ago, and it's been tweaked a couple times since. We've gotten sub buckets now, or like I guess it started out
Mm-hmm.
7 buckets. Now we basically have 13. We have some offering rate differences. They've told us some more things about how they integrate offering odds into it, namely that not everything's offered the same amount that you think. Some are just lower because of unspecified things, like you were
Yeah.
bringing up before, Glaive Zuka and Evil Genius is also one of those lesser offered cards, and we don't really know exactly why or like exactly how they determine these. Maybe it's on a case by case basis. Maybe they have a system. Who knows? We also got some information on how they're moving things around in buckets, which is based on average player pick rates. Rather than win rates or something from not average players but like good players. And all the neutral cards are also always the same. It's technically impossible right now without a significant system upgrade to make neutral cards appear in different buckets for different classes. Okay, so what is your, over the course of this year, what is your review now that we've been with this system for like a year and 3 months?
All right. So I'm going to preface this by saying I probably have spent more time on the bucket system than anybody. And like, I'm actually including Blizzard on this. I think like in trying to like dissect the bucket system, because when the bucket system first came out, I was the one who basically, I went through Hearth Arena data and I sorted all the cards into their proper buckets. And then later, thankfully, Jerk and Hawk and later ZD Man, they helped me to like actually automate it, so I wasn't doing this stuff by hand.
Yep.
Like I was previously. But like before Blizzard actually gave us the data, we were going through all the data to give everybody the buckets for like the first 6 months. So having gone through all of this, knowing more about this than pretty much anyone, my thought is I want Blizzard to get rid of the bucket system. That would be my like big thing there.
And
like,
why would you want Blizzard to get rid of the bucketing system? What is wrong with it that is to the point of it being not worth it to fix?
All right. So yeah, this is going to be a wild chat. Like, this is 7 o'clock. If this ends at 8 o'clock, I will be surprised. But okay.
Okay, well, this is probably going to end before 8 o'clock, so we'll get all this in.
All right, I'm gonna go through this as quick as I can. As I mentioned, I went over the message limit on this. Okay, so first off, starting with the positives of the system, like what the system does. First off, it's supposed to provide picks that are more interesting choices for your deck construction. So you don't have auto pick cards. You don't have Fireball versus like Argent Squire and Wisp or something like that. It allows you to go more, it gives you more control over your deck, and it allows you to go for more synergy decks, point two. So for example, like Tinkertown Technician. We've all played through, many of us have played through GVG. Tinkertown Technician has hit more in this meta than it ever really did in GVG. Like, just because it's a lot less punishing to pick mechs, because the mech is going to be against similarly power cards. A third one is that.
Well, that's also because there's more mechs now than in GVG.
Yeah, but like, there aren't as many like big. I was gonna say like the Boomsday mechs outside of Mech Warper, like you have Mech Warper and upgraded Framebot, but it's like you get like 2 extra.
What do you mean Mech Warper?
Not Mech Warper, Mecharoo.
Mecharoo, right?
Yeah.
Well, so, you still have like micro tech controller. You have like the replicating menace. Like you have stuff that creates mechs, right? Like there's a lot of Boomsday holds its own on the neutral section of mechs, I think, compared to GVG. But point taken, you are definitely punished less hard for going into mechs. And I was talking before, sometimes you're forced into the mech route much more frequently than you were before.
Yeah. One thing, the third point I was going to make is that one of the reasons that Warrior was so bad was in the previous metas before the bucket system was that they got so many horrible cards, or they got so many cards that had a constructed point and that had no point being in arena. And so if you picked Warrior, your draft was going to be just littered with these horrible cards. So because of the 7th bucket, because of micro adjust, because of that massively reduced offering rate, like it gets rid of those cards that really should not be in arena because they do nothing in arena. And then a fourth point, which Blizzard has never stated, but for newer players, it makes it a lot easier to draft a deck and not make mistakes. Like I remember playing before you guys started up Hearth Arena, And I remember when Hearth Arena really began to take off, that there was a definite shift in the meta. There was a definite shift in what people in the cards that people picked. Like the deck quality everywhere went up after Hearth Arena became like a really useful tool when you guys were with it in the arena.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what they have here, the bucket system is basically kind of like a Blizzard version of Hearth Arena, where it says, okay, you're going to pick these cards. You're not going to pick that absolutely horrible card that
Well,
doesn't belong.
more less like Arthur and more like just like any tier list is what
Oh yeah,
Blizzard's doing, because they're literally making a Blizzard tier list and then putting it into tiers. These 14 tiers.
yeah,
They're not like molding it to your deck.
yeah. Well, what I mean is that basically you cannot make a stupid choice. You can make
Right.
stupid choices, but you can't make like an egregiously stupid choice like
Yeah.
taking a stone skin gargoyle over a fireball.
Yeah. It creates a bottom, right? Like a high
Floor.
floor. Yeah. Floor.
Yeah. All right. So I think those are the positives of the system. So now I got like about 20 negatives, give or take. All right. So first things first. So while the picks are, you have more interesting picks. The top half of the first bucket 0.5 or whatever, this screws up a lot of pretty much everything in like the first bucket and the top half of the first bucket. Because I'll give you an example. This is AGS replay data. Flame Strike is taken about, give or take, 0.5 ish, 0.6 per deck, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And Fireball and Polymorph are like 0.08 or 0.09.
Mm-hmm.
So these are cards all in the top half of the first bucket, and they should be offered roughly the same thing. And Flame Strike's taken about 6 times as much.
Yep.
True Silver is taken about twice as much as a Blessing of Kings. Last meta, Zombie Chow was in the bottom half of the first bucket, but it was almost
And
always.
these are all like what people should do. This isn't just people's preferences. Like we have True Silver rated 15 points higher than Consecration and Blessing of Kings. We have Flame Strike rated at like 20. No, like also like 12 to 15 points higher than Polymorph and Fireball. So they're just like True Silver and Flame Strike are just better cards than Concentration and Blessing of Kings. And they're in the same 0.5 bucket because they couldn't make like a 0.25 bucket and just dump Flame Strike in it, or just dump Troop Silver Champion in it. So there's at the very top there's more variance, right, in the bucket. I mean, there's variance everywhere in the bucket, but at the very top it's unavoidable.
Yeah. And then like other for chat, I was supposed to be on a month ago, so a lot of these points were from the last meta. But like Abyssal Enforcer was in the same bucket as Zombie Chow, and it was taken 10 times as much.
Yep.
Potion of Madness, whether you are happy or not that it was put in the top half of the first bucket, like when you compare it to like Cabal Talent Priest, it was like Cabal Talent Priest was taken like 5 times as much, and Talent Priest was a minion while Potion of Madness was a spell. So it's like you take a lot of these cards, these premium cards, and just because they're against better cards and properly bucketed cards, by the way, like you can argue Chow and Potion of Madness should not have been there, or they should have been in maybe a little bit of lower bucket.
Yeah, but it just I mean, we don't need even all these examples, right? Just from Paladin and Mage, the super classics, right? True Silver, Consecration, Blessing of Kings, your 3 Paladin power cards, Flame Strike, Polymorph, Fireball, your 3 powerful like Mage cards. Like, do we want a meta, right? Like where you don't see Polymorph and Fireball as much, and you don't see Blessing of Kings and Consecration as much, and you just see more True Silvers and more Flame Strikes, relatively? Like, is that like, I don't know. Because you're going to come out and say that you don't think that's a good thing, I assume.
Yeah, because like my next point was going to be, because of this, you're taking away a massive thing, which is class identity. For mages, like a key class identity is their ability to remove big minions. But because you're losing Fireball, because you're losing Polymorph, because these cards basically do not appear anymore, Mage loses that classic identity. Paladin, their classic identity was being able to buff things. And when you don't have Blessing of Kings, you're reliant on like whatever rotates in. Like here they have Silvermoon Portal and Seal of Champions, so they still have buffs around. but like their big buff, Blessing of Kings, is basically something you never play around anymore.
Right.
And so, because of the bucket system, you're removing a lot of their classic identity, what the classes are built around.
Yeah. It's extremely striking for Mage. Between Fireball and Polymorph, Mage was the hard removal class, and now it's yeah. I mean, you're right. I never play around hard removal for Mage. If it happens, it happens. But it used to be something you played around kind of desperately because mages would definitely have a Fireball or Polymorph in their hand by turn like 4 or 5 or 6 because they would have 2 or 3 of them in their decks back in the day, in like the classic days. So now there's some dilution. You probably wouldn't get those numbers anyway, but the actual amount of polymorphs and fireballs in people's decks are pathetic.
Yeah, and a small little thing I had, I didn't add into my rant, but last year when I was playing Rogue and when I was doing like real good with Rogue, one of the things I always advocated was that you never pick an Assassinate as Rogue. And the reason you don't pick an Assassinate is because, like, if you take a look at the second bucket for Rogue, like you have Assassinate. Like, if you take an Assassinate, you're taking that over premium cards. But it used to be, it was like your top bucket was like Sap and Vile Spine, and then you had like Assassinate and Kidnapper and Cheap Shot, and I know there's like a Venom Weapon. So it's one of these things where it's like all of Rogue's real good cards, all of their real removals were concentrated into this bucket. And so I was very much of the theory of don't take the hard removals because you want those flexible cards, and you can get the hard removals like the knockoff hard removals, like Plague Scientist, like Cold Blood, like the Onyx Spellstone.
Right.
You can get those in lower buckets, and because of that, you don't really want to take a top bucket hard removal.
Yeah.
Just because of what you have to give up.
Whereas you're comparing this to a non-bucket system where Assassinated will be put up against crappy cards most of the time, and then you're kind of forced to take them.
Yeah. So like it's one of these things where like I don't want to be pigeonholed into something here. So like as I said, if I'm taking an Assassinate, I'm giving up on something else. And basically those other cards, because they're misbucketed, because they are underbucketed, I would want to take those cards, and therefore I wouldn't want to take an Assassinate when I'm going to have enough removals from other cards.
Right. Yeah. And so just so the listeners could, the difference is not like how much hard removals end up in a deck. You probably get the same of that whether you're bucketing or not bucketing. The difference is the type of hard removals end up in your deck. In a normal like non-bucketing system, you will see a lot of Assassinates because the Assassinates are better than most other hard removals. In a bucketing system, you will see whatever is the more like it's like some combination between whatever Blizzard has costed it versus what you think the cost is versus how much the meta like requires hard removal. And in the prior meta, the meta didn't require that many hard removals, and Rogue had a crap ton of hard removals. So the ones you're going to take are probably like you don't want to use your second bucket on it, right? So you see less Assassinates. Yeah. And that's the case even though Assassinate's one of the best cards in the second bucket in a normal meta. Like these days, I would take Assassinate. I don't know, like most of the time in its bucket. It's a pretty good card. But and we also lost a lot of the other hard removals that existed before, and they were replaced by small removals that don't quite fit the same role. But yeah. So what part of this so far we're talking about class identity, which is like kind of like fun in arena, right? Like that's less balance, more like about fun. And I know Ixar has made this point before where bucketing is not about balance. Bucketing is about how they want the meta to look, right? It's about like how they want people's drafting experiences to be. It's about all these things that have nothing to do with the final balance in the arena. They're going to get balance in the arena with micro adjusts, which, as we've discussed in the first half of the episode, not really quite happening. But yeah. So this is kind of a design point, and I definitely agree with you that I would rather see more Assassinates than more like I don't know weird hard removals. But maybe Blizzard wants it the other way around, right? Maybe Blizzard wants, and I mean, from a competitive player perspective, it's really hard for me to say this, but maybe Blizzard wants to see more Conjurers calling and more Firelands portals than polymorphs and fireballs. Like, maybe
No,
maybe
please
you and
not.
I want to see polymorphs and fireballs. Maybe Blizzard thinks that's boring, and that some RNG is more exciting. Some new Rise of Shadows cards is more exciting to these like 3-win players that we're talking about, and it'll be more fun for more people, rather than. I don't know. I'm just because they have to have that kind of a thought, right? They know, like, if they didn't know this was going to be the effect when they did this, they've had like 9 months to figure it out. Of like when they put these things into these buckets and gave it's been 9 months since they've had sub buckets. So at this point, the fact that they're not moving things around, like they're not demoting polymorph for fireball, they're not doing whatever, it means that they don't think it's that big of a problem. And knowing Blizzard, we know that they care more about average player experience and average player like whatever than they do about balance in the arena, at least balance at the top. So I think it's kind of a statement from Blizzard's side that they just like disagree with us. Us old school fundamentalist flavor people, right? Where we want our mages to polymorph and fireball and flame strike equally, rather than like Conjurer's Calling and Firelands Portal, which I don't know. Every time I see a Firelands Portal, I'm just like, that's not fair. Even though I rate it lower than a Fireball, right? Like, we literally have a tier list, right? Firelands Portal at a 131 and Fireball at a 147. Polymorph, by the way, is a 148 in this meta for us. And yet, whenever I see a Firelands Portal, I'm like, oh, why? Why is the mage doing that? And when I see a Fireball, I'm like, yup, the mage fireballed me. Like, I'm very accepting of it, like, feelings-wise. So I don't know. It could be just like a us thing. I don't know. And I really wish there was like someone who like we could talk to that's like the representative of the casual players in the arena, which I don't know. It's just really hard to find someone like that, because the casual players in arena. I think you'll get to this point later, but I was reading one of your points earlier, and you mentioned one of your potential solutions to all of this would be to care more about people who have played at least 100 like arenas like historically. And that's going to eliminate like the vast majority of players, right, of player data, because the vast majority of players in the arena have not played 100 arenas. They're like that level of casual. And it's I don't know. It's hard to even like find them to get their opinions. So I can't. It's hard for me to think of like, Blizzard, are you right or are we right or like whatever? But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of my next points was going to be about casual players. Is that, like I mentioned, that they took away the choice for casual players to make mistakes.
Yep.
But at the same time, what they've done is they've made it a lot harder. Like, number one, just having to know the bucket system to know what to draft makes it a lot harder. But more importantly, in the old meta, the pre-bucket meta, the arena was based around a very simple, very intuitive concept, which was that you played around the best cards.
Yep.
And now, like, with all these cards that are really good cards that are not showing up, the cards you play around, the cards that you see, are going to be cards that are like more of like the mid-range cards. Like, for example, last meta, the Paladin card that you played around the most, I think number one was Bronze Herald, and number two was like, what was it? Sound of Bells.
Yeah, Sound of Bells was the big one.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a bad card, but it's like it kind of goes against learning what the arena is when you say, okay, this you should play around Sound of Bells, but you shouldn't play around Blessed Kings, which is a much more impactful card.
Right.
And like and for all these classes, there's all these things. Like when you go and you take a look, like for any class, and you take a look at the card that appears the most. Like sometimes like Mage, you'll get like Firelands Portal, but in Druid, it's things like Living Roots and Wrath. In Hunter, like Unleash the Beast and Mark Shot. In Paladin, Bronze Herald, Seal of Champions, which is like a third bucket card. Murloc Knight, Silver Moon Portal, which is like a fourth bucket card. Priest, it's like Evil Conscriptor, which is like a third or fourth bucket card or something like that. But you go through these cards, and the cards you should really play around are cards that are okay, good, but not great. And then like if you're a new player, it creates just another barrier to like really learn the arena.
Yeah, it's a very kind of distinct experience, right? When you're going in and then you're playing around these weird cards, some of which you don't see in constructed either, and then you're like, oh, so I'm not playing around the, like I don't feel like I'm facing a mage. I feel like I'm facing a class that has a mage hero power, and then these weird like set of cards.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you all the way on all these flavor points. Like they all feel weird to me. This is not like something that made the arena better.
And then one thing, which I'm not sure if it's a flavor point, but it's something that definitely makes the picks feel worse, is that, especially with top buckets, the picks are all the same.
Yes.
Like if you've played Shaman, you have gotten Lightning Storm, Walking Fountain, and Hex 2 picks in a row. Like that's just like that's guaranteed to happen. That you've gotten that exact selection of picks twice in a row. With as a kind of small point, like with Druid, if you pick swipe, if you get a swipe, it is only going to be against Power of the Wild and Acorn Bearer, because there are literally no other cards that are in the top half that are in the first bucket for swipe to be against. And if you get Power of the Wild and Acorn Bearer, the only cards it'll be against are Batterhead and Mech Warper. So you get these weird things where like all the picks, especially in the top, like the first few buckets, they all feel the same. And and as I mentioned before, Blizzard wants a lot of choice, but when the card picks are the same, you really don't get that choice. And when you got like these cards that are just clearly better than other cards, you're going away from like the key philosophy of the bucket system, which is to give you more choice.
Yep.
And I'll touch on one more thing, is that I've seen people that want like kind of like a flat system, where it's like the top 20, like top 10% of the cards are all bucketed there, and then there's like the next 10% that are bucketed there, and so on. Like the problem is that if you take a look at the cards in Arena, like the really, really, really top cards, there's like very few of them. And then as you sort of get more to like the mid-range cards, there becomes a disproportionate amount more of mid-range cards. Like if you go to your if you go to Lightforge and you sort by the classic system, like it's like basically what every 12 points, give or take.
We have like every 13 points, or we have a band that's it's not even like because we have the same problem as you were talking about, right? It's not even, it escalates. It's not every 12 points, because we couldn't do every 12 points. If we made bans at every 12 points, you would have like the middle one, or like what Blizzard would call the third bucket, or it's actually what Blizzard would call like the fourth bucket or whatever. But it would have the middle one go all the way down and be like twice the size of the two next to it. So we actually had to increase. We had 8 points for our middle section, like 96 to 104, and then we go up to we have 8 points for the two sections next to it, and then we go up to like 16 points, I think, or something like that. For the ones that go one over, right? So we're going by like sort of a not quite, but sort of a standard deviation, like a half standard deviation concept here.
So basically, going back to the top bucket, it causes, like, it's a small issue, but it causes a lot of issues. And I think like I know Blizzard has talked about, okay, like they said they don't like that a lot of the picks feel the same, but there isn't really much of a choice that they have, because there's really so few cards that you can put up against that top bucket. So this is not Blizzard screwing up. This is just a complete design flaw, like, because of the bucket system.
Yeah, I mean, they're wrong. In two ways they're wrong. Well, one, they know why they're wrong, and two, we know why they're wrong. The thing that they know why they're wrong is that they don't have to have 7 buckets. They could have fewer. They can determine how many buckets there are, and they can just do what they do with the top bucket, which again is not a great solution. We talked about this before. They could just live with a little variance at the very top, right? You would your problem with Flamestrike Polymorph Fireball really is half that Flamestrike, like Polymorph and Fireball will appear with Flamestrike almost all the time, and more with
Yeah.
like if you like triple the size of that bucket, sometimes Flame Strike
Mhm.
won't be an option, and you'll pick your Polymorphs and Fireballs again, right?
Yeah.
And that'll be it's not gonna go all the way towards solving the problem, but it'll do some work. And the
Well,
other thing,
the other thing is that if you take like the fireballs and the polymorphs, then that's a lot of other cards that you're not taking. But that's kind of more what we had with the older system.
exactly, like when you get to the very top, the older system just
Mhm.
sneaks back in because that's the default, and
Yeah.
there's no good solution for what happens at the top. Blizzard can't find any. I don't know if you have. I can't find any. Um,
hmm
so
I
you
have
kind of
one, but I have one like at the very end. Like it's not that I want the cards to be nerfed. It's I have a solution, but my solution is basically to go back to the like
mm,
kind of go back to the old system, and I'll bring that up later.
okay.
All right.
The statistic goes because Blizzard likes their offering algorithms and things like that. The way to do it mathematically is just whenever people pick cards, make it appear less often.
Mhm.
So if everyone's
Yeah.
picking Flame Strike, well, Flame Strike's just going to appear less often.
Mhm.
So take that, right? So I thought that's what they were doing with Evil Genius in the buckets, but you're talking about Gladezuka, and it doesn't seem exactly like that's what they're doing. Maybe this system is implemented by hand right now
Yeah.
of which ones they're penalizing or not. But they could create an algorithm that does that, and that'll at least solve, not like fully solve, but mitigate a lot of that issue.
All right.
Um, yeah, the other thing that is problematic with what Blizzard's doing, you go back to Druid, is that they misbucket a
Mhm.
lot of cards. Right? They keep misbucketing cards because they're bucketing by player pick rates, and so what you
Mhm.
really want at the top is like if you look at our tier list and you think that we're doing a pretty good job of doing this, you have swipe at the top, fine, but like Druid of the Claw, we
Mhm.
rate higher than swipe in this meta. Like Mulch,
Mhm.
we've always rated higher than swipe, I think.
Yeah.
Forest Aid has always been higher than swipe. Like you have plenty of candidates that you can raise to the swipe level, and they're just not doing it because
Mhm.
they are going by their like system of average player pick rates and nothing else. And
Yeah.
their system of moving cards from average player pick rate is not even all that like. I mean, it's very forgiving, right? It's favored towards keeping it in whatever bucket they currently have it in, not favoring towards moving them around all the time.
Yeah. For the record, I actually am in support of using pick rates to determine data. Like this is going to be my next point, moving
Mm-hmm.
away from the top buckets.
Yeah.
Uh, so for me, if Blizzard is going to do something mechanically, I would rather they do it by pick rates. Like I don't necessarily have. I know Blizzard has people who know how to play the game there, but I don't think they have people who know Arena really well there. So like if they had something like what you guys have with your tier list, or if they had something like Hearth Arena, where Hearth Arena takes like a bunch of elite players and they
Mm.
decide on the card levels, like that would be a fair system, I would feel. If Blizzard decided to do that, then that would cause issues. If Blizzard decided to bucket by win rate, like I already pointed out, Gnomish Experimenter, second best card in the game. Argent Squire, fifth best card in the game, according to like deck win rate. So for a mechanical system, I feel pick rate is the
Well, you would
best.
combine win rate with pick rate, right? So if a card's being
Well,
picked a lot, its win
yeah,
rate should be lower, and if it's higher, then it's what then that becomes the problem. And if it's something like Gnomish Experimenter, its pick rate should be
mhm,
disproportionately low, and then its win rate being disproportionately high would not be like as big of a problem. It would probably still be like raise the bucket or something, but it just wouldn't be like it wouldn't be bucket at bucket two, you know.
yeah.
And as you raise buckets, you're competing against bigger cards, so it'll even out at some point.
Mhm. All right. So I said, yeah, you can do that. I actually had that suggestion like about a year ago,
Yeah,
but
it's like a
for
mixed
the most
system.
part,
I don't think anyone's advocating for, or at least we're not advocating for like a pure win rate system.
yeah,
But there's middle grounds you can take.
yeah,
It's not like all pick rate or all win rate.
mhm. Yeah. As I said, but pick rate, I'm fine with Blizzard doing that. I don't think it's like that egregious. But there are problems with pick rate, which you guys have gone over here. So, and one of these things here is that first off, there's always going to be cards that are misbucketed
Mm-hmm.
from the new set or whatever. And if you have a system that's based around having a choice, having cards that are over bucketed and are auto picks, or having cards, having cards that are over bucketed and never picks, or having cards that are under bucketed and auto picks, it kind of ruins like the philosophy of what the system is built around. So like bucketing definitely does matter in terms of these systems. But I think more important is that pick rates is that the people who are picking these cards, I brought this point up earlier. Half the players who play in Arena average less than 3 wins.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these players are not like they average less than 3 wins. Like, what I want to say, they average less than 3 wins because they make mistakes during the game. Like you brought up, what's it? The Druid card, the 8 mana, Forests 8. What is it? The 8 mana, some of the 2/2s. Forest 8.
The Forest 8, yep.
Forest 8. Okay. I have seen I have not been screwed by Forest 8 when I face Druids. I've seen Druids play Forest 8 against me. And then I've seen them not play the second Forest 8 after I traded most of my board to clear off the first one.
Yep.
And I see people misplay a lot like that. So what I'm saying is that the people who are misplaying, these are the people who give Fel Reaver stealth. Yep. These are the people that remove Banshee from the game. These are the people who do not understand that poisonous cards are good cards. These are the people who think that any card that it hurts you in a little bit of a way is a bad card.
No sacrifice, no cards left behind. The whole deck wins.
Pretty much. Yeah. These are the people who they overpick certain cards that are very flashy. Like, for example, hand buff cards. Like, if you want to look at pick rate, the hand buff cards, like Grind Street Outfitter,
Smuggler's Run.
Smuggler's Run. Those cards were like in the second bucket.
Yeah.
They didn't belong in the second bucket, but people just kept on picking them because those cards were flashy. And this actually creates another problem. Like with those cards, the bad players will pick those cards, and then they will lose more often because of those cards.
Yep.
Good players don't have a choice now because we realize, okay, maybe I like hand buffs, but I am giving up so much to play a hand buff deck that I am just hurting my deck by doing this. And so we have less choice. So like
we have choices of Hogsteed or Scribe or Dollar and Crusader.
Yeah.
That's our choices right now.
Yeah. But all of us get hurt by the fact that these cards are bucketed based around what people who do not have that much knowledge of the game are determining. Because we've had the suggestion thrown around, like, everybody just pick this bad card so it gets over bucketed, or don't pick this card so it gets under bucketed. But like the 7-win player makes up like less than 1% of the arena meta. So we really don't have an option we have to deal with what people who really do not know much about the game are dealing with.
Yep. And it limits what our meta is at the top. And you were talking about how the buckets are working at the top and being very sparse in the top bucket and the top 2 buckets. That adds to it as well. I think, like a lot of this can actually be just mitigated by, one, having less buckets, especially at the top, and 2, and Blizzard hasn't done this because I think they like this whole idea of wild rotation meta, and if they follow my suggestion, the wild rotations meta is going to be a little less rotation-y, but just add more cards to the pool if you're going to get rid of half the cards in the 7th. Like, if you're going to make the 7th bucket, just like cover, I don't know what it is, like a third, a quarter of your entire card pool, and then just like never offer them to people. That's fine, but you'll need more card sets to compensate for the diversity. So right now you have like 4 major sets and 1 minor set in the arena, and I don't know. They may plan on doing this once they have another set out, because this is, remember, we're right now in the first set of the rotation of a normal rotation anyway. So maybe they plan on adding another 130 cards to the card pool, just kind of like permanently, and rotate that way. That will make things a little bit better. If they add another 135 in after that, that'll make it better as well. So these are, like, I think a lot of things driving this is like outside of the pick rate and the whole, like, you know, you can favor the choices of average players and below average players, or you can favor what actually wins, or you can favor what pro play, or like what top or 7 win plus players win with. And they'll all create different metas for all sorts of different people at all sorts of different things, and Blizzard kind of picks and chooses on which ones they want. But a lot of the other ones, I think you just need a bigger pool. You're not going to solve anything with a bigger pool, but you're going to make it so much better. Like that, rather than, because right now, I mean, I know what you're feeling. I know what all of our listeners are feeling, which is that you've seen Hogsty too many times. You've seen Scribe too many times. You don't want to do this anymore. And if your memory is long enough that it went like, if your memory was more than a year long, and you had a memory of a competitive arena meta without buckets, and go one step back, don't even take the MSG meta. MSG meta was pretty sorry, not MSG meta. The meta with MSG in it.
All right.
The prior one, don't even take the prior one. It's go back like one more. Like, you have if you look at like Kobold's Catacombs, like right after that was released, or even before that, right after Knights of the Frozen Throne was released, those were pretty diverse metas compared to what we see now in terms of the kinds of neutrals that you see. Like, Ungoro dominated the meta pool, but after that it just got more and more like you definitely don't have the Hogsteed and the bucketing problems that you see now. And I think you can get back to it with some combination of increasing card pool, maybe doing something with your top 2 buckets to, you know, make it not as small, and then doing something, right? Like, you're talking about how if you go purely by pick rates, weird things are going to happen too, and I agree. But there's a solution in there somewhere between pick rate and offering rate, between average player and good players, between total noobs and people who have done, like you were talking about before, 100 plus arena runs. Like, there's some kind of mechanical solution there that does not require Blizzard to like be the masters of the arena to figure it out.
One other thing I was going to make mention of is that deck construction is a very, very hard skill.
Yes.
Like, actually constructing your deck. Like, I'm a teacher. Like, that's my normal job. I'm a teacher. And for me, it would be like the equivalent of, for newer players, they're learning like how to make sentences. And then deck construction is something like, okay, tell me the difference between I have been to New York and I had been to New York. And like that's something where it's like, for really advanced players, this is something where like I would feel that this is designed at them. For like the lower players, as I feel a lot of it is just like putting up a floor so they can't screw their own deck up. But for them, the options to pick, like if something like what was it, Grime Street Outfitter, if that was moved down by 1 bucket or 2 buckets or something like that, would the lower level players really be that upset at that card being there? Or if Keening Banshee was moved up a couple of buckets, would they be that upset that they have a card that they don't want to pick? Like, I think the entire like deck construction thing and the choices is designed more at like the 5, 6, 7 win player than the lower level player.
Yeah. And this is a problem. Like, we're running into this problem right now designing Gods Unchained play modes, where there's this drive. There's always a drive, because they're like, what do you do with a card game, right? You could hand you a deck and then you play it, which is basically what net decking is. You can play super casually with whatever cards you happen to own, and that's what super casual play is. But at some point, one of the more exciting parts of everybody is trying to like put a deck together. So you try to get people involved in that. But then you need to fight against the fact that that's way too many decisions to be giving someone, and to have them like actually have a great time like doing it and then playing with the deck and having it not suck. That's just, it's too much. It's overwhelming. So you have to find a way to then control for it. While like there's so many factors that go into what makes a successful limited format for average players, and it's hard to find like a winning formula, and I don't think Blizzard's found it because of how not popular Arena is relative to Hearthstone. But there's a lot of options out there and a lot of things that that they can do, and it's
yeah. And one thing here is, I'm doing my best not to like be insult Blizzard. Like, people know that I'm
feel free to
terse.
insult Blizzard. You're not
well,
like you don't have like a whole like, oh, I'm gonna play nice with everybody attitude anyway.
Oh yeah, that's the whole point. Like, I'm an ass, and I fully admit that I'm an ass. And if something's stupid, I'm gonna call it out as stupid. But like, I recognize that Blizzard is trying.
Yeah.
I like, as much as I disagree with like Muster not being in the top half of the first bucket, I recognize that there has like I'm going with the idea that Blizzard put it there because Blizzard wants Muster to show up so that people can remember this card. Like, I'm going with like, they put Abyss, they did, even though Abyssal was like literally one of the 3 cards that they were used to offering it 50% by, they put it there because because Abyssal was just such a large part of MSG that they wanted it to be in the meta.
Yep.
So like, I'm going with the option that Blizzard is actually that they're trying really hard and that it's a difficult thing. I'm just saying that what they've done is, like, I would prefer the old system with like a few changes, or for them to make some changes to the new system, to the system that they have.
Yeah, and there's so much they can do. I feel like I keep saying this. There's so much they can do, and then they do actually, quite frankly, a good amount of like stuff. And then I'm like, there's so much they can do. There seems to always be so much that that they can do, and that's probably because the vast majority of this stuff should have done before they released the game, instead of 5 years after. So there was a lot of things that they could do. Oh god, tournament mode really should have been like, it should have come out when Nax came out. Like, it's unbelievable that not some form of basic tournament mode even exists in the game. But yeah, in terms of bucketing,
one thing I really want is, and they kind of have it in Tavern Brawl, but I want a free mode. And what I mean by free mode is that like all the basic rules that they have, you can't they get rid of all the rules, and you can just put like, you can
it's
mix
like
classes.
You can, like
you can mix classes.
Pick whatever hero power you want.
Yeah, well, not necessarily that, but you can like take class cards and you can put them in other classes.
Okay.
Or you can put as many of a certain card in there in a deck. Like, for Arena, I think like one thing that's been holding Arena back is that you cannot play Arena in Standard, because in Arena you can get an option to have like 3 or 4 of the same cards.
Right.
But like in Standard, like, that's not possible. So like, any Arena tournament is based around the fact, oh, you can't draft more than 2 of this card, and then that's not really Arena.
I think I don't think it's that big of a limitation. I agree it's a limitation, and it makes things mechanically really awkward. But if you're running a tournament and you're like, oh, you can't pick any like more than 2 of a particular card, I'm like, okay. Like, I don't think it's super altering my my game plan, because to be offered and want to take more than like 2 of a card is it's still more of a rare occurrence than a usual occurrence.
What you could do is you could create like one of the best things is when you let the people actually create their own stuff. So like, if you had a tournament mode, that's one thing, but then if you could like adjust the rules, like, imagine Hearthstone speed chess. Imagine Hearthstone where every single turn took 15 seconds. And then you had to play in that kind of meta where you have to be able to react fast, where you have to be able to deal with the animations and all that stuff. And then that's not standard or constructed. That's something just the players create.
Right.
Like, for example, auto chess.
Right. Like you're looking for a custom mode, like where you can set the rules and whatever they are, including setting the like lack of basic rules. So it would be like, here are the basic rules of the game. Feel free to toggle them off or toggle one of our other options that we give you, right? And you can put them in like, whether it is, if tournament mode ever comes out, your own tournaments, or just like friendlies, right? Like just friendly with your friends, or make a room and then someone joins you and plays in the same mode. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with with the game, and the game doesn't really go there. Or like take even a step back from something like that gives the players that much control. Just like another limited format. Blizzard has one limited format. Blizzard's basically been doing things similar to copying MTG since the beginning, and they've been, one of the things they've taken kind of great care to do is just to focus everything on one game mode, and so Arena is it for their limited game mode. And maybe like you're talking about cutting out buckets, right, and going back to the old system, which by the way I think that'll be an excellent like event just to like see what would happen, because why not, right? Like if I'm like as a developer, I'm like, you want to A/B test stuff. Some things I think is a horrible idea, but I'm not against A/B testing it, especially if Blizzard's going to basically make us all beta testers anyway. Like we've gone way far past the idea that Blizzard's going to give us complete tested games to play. We are the test rats, and that's what we're going to be for the rest of the game's life, and we have to kind of accept that. But once you accept it, I don't know, you can do crazier stuff than they've done. They're kind of taking this weird middle road of experimentation, where it kind of at certain points may not go far enough. At other points, it's already lost its the benefits of having like a stable meta or a tested meta.
I think that's kind of like half of what Brawl is. Like Tap and Brawl, a lot of the newer Brawls are just like, okay, let's put this new mechanic in there. Let's see how this new mechanic works, and then later on they introduce that mechanic.
Right.
So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, and you can see how people like it, right? If people like, if it works fine, but people aren't really interested in it, you're like, maybe we don't, maybe we make it a one card thing instead of a total mechanic. It's
like what I would really like is, like, as an example, is do a Brawl 1 week and make it a basically arena style or Brawlicium or whatever, but instead your picks are like the dungeon run picks, where you're given 10 sets of 3 different cards that follow a certain thing,
right,
and then you build your deck like that. You play against everybody in what's basically an arena format.
Yeah. And like, Blizzard already... Oh, well, okay. That's going to take more work for Blizzard unless they're just going by buckets. Like, if they're actually going to follow a theme. At this point, I'm unsure that Blizzard has, like, a beast tag that they can work with in Arena. Like, they probably do, but, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. Okay, so here's the question to you. If you were, if they were getting rid of Arena, let's say the game plan secretly within Blizzard is not that we're going to, work on buckets, or we're going to, like get rid of buckets and replace it with something. What if they're scrapping the whole thing and they're just going to build something new that they like more, that they think other people will like more? Still limited format. It's got to be something they can't like. They can't have to, do too much work on an ongoing basis, right? They don't want to make it another Brawl mode, but they do want to make a limited format mode that they can eventually maybe make competitive. They can standardize some set of rules, and that casuals will like and enjoy. So getting back to that deck building issue, right? Where deck building is really something for very advanced players, but all the people who suck at the game really want to do it, and they need to have at least a decently good positive experience come out of it. What do you do with that? Do you tweak some fundamental rules of Arena and keep it what it is? Do you go with something like MTG Draft, or like the most basic one I keep thinking is Sealed, but that's like, just like opens up packs, build a thing, but that's kind of overwhelming. You have so many options there. Like, what would make Arena, or what would make limited Hearthstone better if they just are not iterating on the idea and just wholesale doing something else?
I would say what I would do, because I'm not prepped for this question, but the first thing that will come to mind is something like where you have 5 or 6 cards and you pick 2 cards from those cards. Because there you get a large selection of cards. You get your own choice with the cards. Like, I would say something like that. Maybe like Shadowverse. What Shadowverse had was a choose 2 system.
Choose 2, yeah. They give you sets of 2 cards, and then you like pick one or the other.
Yeah. Or the other one I would do, like the ones I would think of would be either you get 5 or 6 cards, you pick 2. Shadowverse, we select a set of 2 cards, or where you get to draft 35 cards. And then at the end of the draft, you get to remove 5 cards from your deck. So, like, if you get forced into a garbage pick, you can get rid of those garbage cards.
Mm-hmm.
If you early on try to go for a certain style and then realize you're not going to get that style, you can then adjust your deck and get rid of those cards that didn't go for your style.
Mm-hmm.
And you can you can smooth out your curve a little bit. Like if you go a little bit too high on 2s, you can get rid of your 2s. Things like that.
Yeah.
Like I think that would probably be like the easiest one, like the third one, just like draft 35, get rid of 5 would be the easiest one to get rid of. Would be the easiest one to like implement.
Yeah. That would be a change that I don't think it'll take them too long to put in, and I would definitely be in favor of, and it definitely increases both skill and like doing ridiculous things, right? Which I know Blizzard likes.
All right.
So yep.
Because we don't have that much time, I was gonna go back and go back to my rant.
Go back to your rant. Do you still have 3 points? 50, I still remember. I still remember one more point. Okay, go on to your rant. Pick your two of your 3 remaining points.
All right. So first one here is that because of the reduction in the 1st and the 5th to 7th bucket, the cards that you're offered you have the very small card pool. You brought this up before.
Yeah.
So the problem with this small card pool is that there's a few problems here. First off, because of this, like, there's a lot more variance in your card pool. Like there's a lot more drafts. You get like 4 musters, or you get like 4 abyssals, or things like that. So I've had drafts where I had like 21 5th bucket or worse cards in my deck. And so you create things like where there's a lot more deck variance due to the arena system.
Yep.
Due to the current system than there was in the previous system. Hafu, before Hafu quit, this was like one of her biggest problems with the arena, was that so much felt deck dependent, or it just felt like people had much better decks. Like if you had a good deck and someone had a better deck than you, like there was nothing that you could do. And like this is one of the things that was kind of like eating away at her before she eventually left Hearthstone.
Yeah, I agree with that. We proposed that like once the bucket system came out, I think after 1 month in, we did a review. Like I made a huge Reddit post about it. And one of my points, I made like 4 that were pretty basic, and Blizzard eventually, well, pretty quickly actually, like did all of them except for this last one. And this last point was the one that I think half the people on the thread was like, well, maybe not this one. And that was to standardize, because now that they can standardize the buckets, to just be like, everybody gets X amount of first buckets, X amount of second buckets, blah, 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 blah. And then everybody has an equally powerful deck according to us, Blizzard. So, you know, they won't actually have the same powerful cards because of misbucketings and how often things are offered. But generally, right, you'll very much eliminate a lot of the deck variants. And I thought of that as a no-brainer. Like, now that you can do it, which you couldn't have done without the bucket system, you can actually do it. And then you do it, and then Arena's really, like, much more fair. And people were like, well, I like super powerful decks. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's not as an obvious thing for, even, and this is Reddit, people on Reddit and Hearthstone, which is not, like, the best players, but also not your average player by a long shot. They're people who care enough to be in Reddit and Hearthstone. And they were giving me a lot of pushback on that. So I agree. That would be, I think, that would improve Arena so much. And I honestly don't think the casual players are going to notice or care when you do it. But Blizzard's been, you know, resistant to the idea, and they don't even have to make it exact, right? They just have to tune down the variance, which they can do. They have the tools to tune down variance because they determine how buckets are distributed. And I totally agree. That would be huge.
And another one, which is going back to the entire field thing, is that when you get a 5th or 6th or 7th bucket card, it feels bad to get those cards. And that happens quite frequently. Legendaries is like even more egregious, because legendaries, it used to be you hear that pain, you see that legendary, and it's like really, really awesome. And now you're getting Millhouse Cho and like whatever garbage legendary just came out from the latest set, like Nomi. Like if you get Millhouse Cho Nomi, like that legendary pick, which used to be like a really awesome feeling. Oh, cool, I got a legendary. It's like, oh crap, I got a legendary. And it feels so bad when you're drafting a deck and you hit those cards, or when you hit like 3 or 4 or 5, 6 or 7
Mm-hmm.
bucket cards in a row. And that's something that really did not happen. Like it happened, but it was like one of those things where it's like rare, and now it's like common, especially if you play classes that got micro just like Rogue. The thing with Rogue before was that Rogue got micro adjusted so much that it wasn't that you couldn't get good Rogue decks. It was that you had
Yeah.
such a chance to get a bad Rogue deck that it felt absolutely horrible
Even if you
to
didn't
play
get
the
a
card.
bad rogue deck in terms of how it would perform, it just feels
Mhm.
terrible to draft because you're going to keep seeing those picks over and over again. And even if
Yeah,
you manage to make it work as well, and you hit your like whatever normal win rate of from an average class, like that was not fun.
yeah,
It was not fun to draft. It was
yeah.
not fun to play. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that one meta where Rogue was. I'm like, I think Rogue is fine. I don't think it needs to be adjusted
Mhm.
or whatever. But I would never play Rogue
Mhm.
now. Like, it's
Yeah,
just so not fun.
yeah.
What was
And
your
then,
third point?
okay, my last point was going to be my favorite thing in the world is experimenting with cards and
Mm-hmm.
seeing which cards work and which cards didn't work. Like the last time I really got to do that was with the Giblin, the Feral Gibberer. Feral Gibberer back in KFT. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody thought this card was garbage,
Yep,
except for me. And then I had the
I
big
remember
Shady
this.
to take this. Yeah, I had the big Shady to take this in the draft, and Shady thought it was just like the most awesome thing in the world. But it's like that experiment, and that would never happen in the current system because it would just be regulated to the seventh bucket, and I would see it so little
Mm-hmm.
that I wouldn't have that opportunity. In KFT, I got to experiment with Grizzled Guardian Druid, and I averaged like almost 10 wins with that, playing completely different from like how everyone played Druid. But if it was in like the current bucket system, like I know it should allow that option, but it just wouldn't be there.
So
I
how
feel.
would that get fixed? Because this seems like the exact opposite problem of your last
Mhm.
point, right? Your last point is they give you a bad bucket, it's all terrible. These are all terrible cards. Terrible cards are terrible. And
Mhm.
this point is, but some terrible cards are actually not terrible. They're actually
Yeah.
secretly like sleepers, and you want to see them enough to be able
Mhm.
to like get them and put them into the meta. So you have these two
All right.
opposing goals, which is right? One is to not see the actual terrible cards. Two is, but still see
Mhm.
enough of the terrible cards that you can experiment with them. Like
Mhm. Okay.
how would you do this
So
with or without buckets?
okay. So what I would do, and this is like the key thing here,
Mhm.
is I'm going to call it a floating bucket.
Okay.
So a floating bucket means any cards that are put in this bucket can appear against any other bucket. So what this means here is that if you have those cards that are like right at the top that are auto picks, like Flame Strike, I would put them in the floating bucket. And now, if you have a fifth, sixth, seventh bucket card, you see a Flame Strike, then you feel happy that you got to see this powerful card against the lower level cards.
Okay.
Flame Strike's always going to be an auto pick, so just treat it like an auto pick. But more importantly, what I would do is I would take the new expansion cards and put it in this floating bucket so that they could appear against any other cards. So, like sometimes you get garbage cards or whatever, but then you would actually be able to, for Blizzard, it would make it a lot easier for them to figure out where the new cards should be bucketed because you just take a look. Okay, how often is this card picked against a third bucket card, or how often is this card picked against a
Right.
second bucket card?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think I think with this option you can, and it also allows for experimentation because again the thing is you need to figure out just like a lot of it is figuring out just how good a card is. Like we know Hogsteed is really good compared to its bucket. We know Scribe is really good compared to its bucket. Like we don't know just how powerful those cards really are. Like, is Scribe necessarily better than Dark Iron Dwarf, or is it necessarily better than something like, or is it Bone Mare levels? And
Right.
we will never know that unless we actually see it against those other cards and feel it and just see how the deck performs. So same
Mm-hmm.
thing with Hogs. So I feel by having this floating bucket, you can solve a lot of the problems with like the first bucket, and then you can also solve a lot of the problems with like uh, initial bucketing, and you can solve a lot of the problems with making like the lower buckets feel better because you're going to occasionally get these cards that are just better than the lower buckets that, and not all of them are going to be OP, but they're just going to make your decks feel a lot better.
I totally agree. I mean, this is. I mean, I think it's an excellent solution. You call it a floating bucket. It's basically an unbucketed card. And it like if Blizzard like it's not like the meta is balanced in the beginning anyway, right? Like why do they even take a stab at doing this initial bucketing? It seems like a lot of work for them. It seems like the results are not great, and I don't know that people like it more. And so to your point, like you bring up a lot of good points where people would like the other system. People would rather just have things unbucketed. And I never even thought about keeping Flame Strike or Swipe or whatever that they determine is too good for the top bucket to be unbucketed. Because like what are you losing? You're right now you're picking Flame Strike over Fireball or Polymorph. So what if I have to pick a Flame Strike over like a Water Ellie? Or like even worse card, like I don't know what I could just find insert random mage card right over a Suit Spewer. Like I would be happy. I wouldn't be like, oh no, right? Like oh, I had no real choice here, in this like one pick or two picks that I get out of a draft, where I had to pick the Flame Strike over my Suit Spewer or Spring Rocket. I would feel like, hey, I got a Flame Strike. That's like a bonus, right? The feeling is very positive. Whether you're a good player or a bad player, and you keep it in low enough quantities because you're only dealing with the very top half of the top bucket cards, and you solve the problem of having them appear against each other all the time. That's I think a really elegant solution to like a lot of the bucketing issues that seemed really hard to fix before, right? Like we were talking like I don't know at this point like maybe like half an hour ago, 45 minutes ago, and we were like, how do you solve for this in the buckets? Well, it turns out you already had a solution.
And then like you'd have to do like a couple other things. Like you definitely combine the first and the second bucket. If there's a card that like gets picked way too much, you put it in the floating bucket. So things like that. And then the one other thing that I would say, like the key thing that I would put in there is for pick rate data. You brought it up. I would say only use it from players who have more than 100 arena games in their belt and who have a win average of 3 or more. Because that's top 50% of the arena players. Those are the people who know about the arena. Like another problem pick rate, which I did bring up, is that bad players are just going to screw up pick rate because they don't know that certain cards are good. Like Violet Worm is, I think, one of the best neutral cards that they have ever printed. I would say Violet Worm belongs in like the second bucket or maybe even the first bucket with how good it can be. But it's a big card, so people aren't going to pick it if they have too many big cards. And a lot of people don't really understand it. So like it's always regulated to the third or fourth bucket where we always auto pick it. But then normal people, they kind of like keep it down. So I think by like increasing that, you will make naturally just make the decks make the picks better. And I think it will benefit everybody if that happens.
Yeah, like right now the skill level is set at a pathetically low skill level. You don't have to bring it up to like where like a lot of people keep saying like, oh, why doesn't Blizzard just hire you, Adwick, to do the buckets? It's like you don't need to get there. Like you could, but that's an expense and whatever and all the whatever stuff. But you could just take a pretty high, like we reference HS Replay all the time, right? That's a 4.5 win rate group. And we don't think that's representative of 7-win players, but it's useful. It's much more useful than if it were just like 3 wins per run. And I do think though, if you're capturing 100 plus runs and also 3+ win average, I think you are capturing about the same segment of the arena player base as like HS Replay, and so I think HS Replay has proven itself very useful in analysis. So it's a good community made bar to follow. I mean, that's I don't really have much to add to the floating bucket idea because it's so elegant. To both the top end and the bottom end, and the floating bucket would be smaller once they figure out how to bucket the cards, which will presumably be like 1 week of data. Hopefully, Blizzard 1 week of data, it's just so I don't know. You said in the beginning that you wanted to get rid of buckets altogether. So
yes,
compared to fixing buckets and all these kind of vague, but in a whole lot of different ways together, seemingly to make it more functional, versus just scrapping it and going back to, what would you go with, like rarity based, or just like all 1/1/1, like every card is equal, like
I'd
offering rate
go
wise?
if I went to the old system. I'd go. I'd keep kind of like the rarity penalties or whatever,
Okay.
because from when I interpreted rarities, I interpreted that commons were like very simple cards. Rares were cards that were a little bit more complex and a little bit more powerful than commons, and epics were like real build around cards or really deck specific cards.
So you basically go by the Blizzard built-in like dusting ratio, right? 1 to 2 to 4.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, yeah, I would do that because I think that's how the cards are actually balanced. And then what I would do is I would go to the old pick rate, like the old system. But what I would do is, like, if you have garbage cards, I would basically reduce their offering rate really, really badly. I'm talking like these are the cards that are just like the what's it called, like the Howl Fiend, for example. The Howl Fiend, the 3-mana 3/6 that discards cards, like that has no business being in there. But I would also reduce the offering rates of like the very top level cards. So you would kind of have like a moderate convergence, like into the middle.
Okay.
So like if a card's too powerful, you reduce its offering rate a little bit, like Microdust. If it's too weak, you just completely get rid of it. So you kind of have it everything in the middle.
And you determine it based on your version of pick rates from your limited your 100 arena plus better than average player pool.
Yeah, I would say I'm not necessarily kind of pick rates from that. I'm not sure exactly how they would implement that.
Okay.
By the way, for chat, I bet on that I would be over 8 o'clock. Like in chat, they're saying Coop bet that Tarrot would be over 8 o'clock. I said at the
more than
stream,
2 hours. You were right.
I said that was going to happen.
You were right. I was like, let's try to get it under 8, but I'm terrible on time too. There's no Merps here. If Merps were here, this would have been before 8, even though that's one extra person talking.
Yeah.
But yeah. So given that system versus the bucket system with a couple of your suggested fixes, like let's say the floating buckets, and they're not taking pure pick rate from average players, but a modified pick rate, maybe with a little win rate, maybe mixed in, whatever, like some fancier way. Why go with the pure version versus the bucket version?
Honestly, because I think the pure version is a lot less hands off. I feel like when Blizzard does something, like you need to invest a lot of time and a lot of effort to make sure that it's done right, or that there's going to be a lot of problems. Like it's taken them a year to fix problems like the rarity bug. It's taken them a year to fix problems like the initial one where they had the 7 buckets, but they didn't have the sub buckets and things were still screwed up.
Right.
So they still have a lot of these problems in here. I feel going back to the old system, it's kind of like self-correcting in a way. And I feel that it would be a lot easier for Blizzard to be hands-off, except if something is like a massive problem.
Yep.
So that's basically what I would do.
That's true. It would be way less of a burden on Blizzard. I remember before there were buckets, people would ask me, what would you do? I'd be like, well, if I were me, really, and Blizzard would never do this. I'd create a system with tiers and whatever. And then Blizzard made the bucket system. I'm like, okay, so Blizzard actually did that. Like, I did not think they had I would have given it less than 5% chance that Blizzard would actually do a bucket system and try to keep up with it. And they've done a mixed job of it. I think it's overall been a positive, but there's a lot of things that need fixing and stuff. And maybe now that they built all these tools, the old system could work in a better way than the bucket system, especially because now they've upped their game, right? It's now a wild rotation meta. They have to do even more stuff than before. It's you think about a lot of things when you're playing the game, when you're designing a game, and one of the things you have to think about is limited resources and not just like money or whatever. But in this case, Blizzard's ability and Blizzard's time. Like I talk about in the middle of a turn, right? Like don't think about all this other stuff. Like a lot of the resources that you're using in a complicated game is your brain power and your attention span. So people are like, oh, you missed
Yeah.
this. I'm like, well, but that wasn't really that important enough to think about. Yes, I know it was a misplay, but I would do it again. Like, I would go through my thought process the exact same way again, and I would miss that same exact thing, because over the course of many types of this kind of repetition, it would work out in my favor. And for Blizzard, one of their most precious resources and limitations is, you know, how much they can dedicate to the arena time-wise and their skill in it. And if they recognize that they're not very good at it, and they haven't been very good at it, and they recognize that they don't want to put the necessary human resources into this that they would need to, if you blow it all up and go and use what you have and apply it back, I could see it working better than the bucket system. I will say, I didn't think before this conversation, I did not think I would be like at a 50-50 with like bucketing or before. I'm pretty tied to the bucketing system, because it was basically like my original proposal from way back in the day that I thought they would never do. But hearing all of this, I would be really curious if they like did an event for like a month or 2 months, right, in one of their seasons, and just got rid of the buckets. And they're like, oh, some crazy people took away the arena buckets, right, and make an event out of it. And see what would happen if they just kept the rest of their systems in and just got rid of buckets. I would be very interested in that.
All right.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? We've covered micro adjust. We've covered buckets. We are 10 minutes over, about to be 15. Well, last thoughts, Tarot, before we wrap up this podcast.
All right. Last thoughts. Nothing except go Frodan for shouting out the Lightforge on the what was it? They're doing the finals now or whatever.
Yeah,
Frodan,
I didn't even know. Did we get a shout out?
Yeah, chat's saying that we got a shout out from Frodan during like the finals to whatever tournament they're running there.
Nice.
So like, yeah. One thing is, I hope whenever they do another arena event that they open it up to people who are not streamers, like whenever Twitch does that. Because I would really like to take part in, like, if they did an event like that and it was like only one day, like I could take time off from work. I could do that thing for one day. But that's probably like my last thought thinking about Frodan.
Yeah. It's Twitch run, right? Like what you want is something that's not Twitch run, so they don't have like a vested interest in the whole streaming thing to be happening. But yeah, there's definitely so many like members of the community who aren't streamers and are very, very good at the same level as other top arena players, and I'm glad that the arena streamers were able to hold our own against the constructed top players in our own home court in the last event. But it would be good to get everybody involved. I guess my last words are just thank you, Frodan, but also thank you, Tarot, for this like really in-depth and amazing conversation. Like every time I talk to you like in person and this is a history where ever since we were making like tier lists, Tarot has, every time we put out an update or anything, Tarot just makes a list like within hours of us like posting this thing up with like 20 cards that he thinks we're like in different agreement with. And sometimes he's right, sometimes we're right, but it's always very in-depth analysis, and we definitely I think I definitely grow as an analyzer and an arena player from hearing your ideas and from like engaging with it. And it's always great to have you on the Lightforge. Definitely one of the most technical and the most like philosophically ideas focused like people we get on the Lightforge. So thank you very much for joining us, Tarot.
No problem. Thanks a lot for having me on. Like, even if it took a month to get here.
Yes, and thank you for being so flexible with the schedule too. For those who are listening for the Lightforge, Merps will be back next. This is Merps. You guys know Merps. He's not going to skip a Pokemon event for silly Hearthstone, but he will be back on the future Lightforges. Okay, so until next time, this is Adwicta.
This is Tarot. Bye-bye.
See you guys.